Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Good, Bad, and Ugly of Business. I'm your host, Katrin Becker. In this podcast, we love to say that, you know what? A smart person learns from their mistakes while a genius learns from others. And that's what we're all about right now. We are bringing all of these experts and amazing people from their field to tell us more about their business, how they got there, and what they've learned along the way so that you can either avoid those mistakes or fail faster. And so we're taking a bit of a different turn today. And of course, I love change. I love all the new things that brings with it. But my guest today has really shaken up the world of environmental due diligence. And for those of you who have ever been in that space, you might think of just, it's really bureaucratic. There's a lot of red tape. Like there's no innovation in that space. But my guest today, Robin Laine, has spinning that on its head. She is the CEO and founder of a company called Transect that is serving the entire US. So if you are a real estate investor, you definitely want to catch out this episode, but it's good learnings that can be applied to any type of business. Robin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Okay, so most of the listeners know, for the first ones that are first time here, I spent 20 years in the environmental compliance and regulation space. So this is something that I'm very familiar with, and I love what we chatted about in the pre-interview of kind of what you're doing. But can you please give the listeners a little bit of history as to what Transect does and what led you to form this company?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you, my background is in environmental consulting. I did it for about 15 years. And while I was in that space, I, as you mentioned, saw a lot of the inefficiencies and kind of inefficiencies of this legacy model that's very based on billable hours. It's very based on report prep and kind of repetitive research and all of this, that I felt like there had to be a better way to bring our industry into the current age with technology. And so I started Transect to try to balance the conservation of the natural world with the needs of the built world with our clients by automating environmental due diligence processes. So we work a lot with land developers. Those are our main customers. Right now, we're focused on accelerating the energy transition. So most of our customers are in the renewable energy space, so solar, wind, and battery storage projects. But our platform is actually industry agnostic, and we do have traditional energy, real estate, consultants, government users in there as well. So going back to why we're here to solve this problem, one of the biggest bottlenecks in land development is environmental permitting. It's why consultants exist, is to help land developers get through those problems. Environmental permitting and environmental policy is a really good thing, and our developer customers generally agree with that and respect that. But they're also trying to meet development goals or energy transition goals, that many of goals have been set by the government or by state agencies and things like that. But those same governments and state agencies have so much red tape around development and around getting through environmental permitting that it's very unlikely that we can meet our energy transition goals, and it's very unlikely that, or it's very hard to meet development timelines and development budgets with the traditional model of environmental consulting. It's again kind of back to consulting. It's very they're wonderful people. Like I said, I used to be one. You used to be one.
Yep.
But their processes are slow and expensive and based on billable hours and lots of repetitive hands-on research and report prep. So we really decided to speed up that permitting process with Transect. So we are automating the environmental due diligence process. That is, and for those who don't know what environmental due diligence means, that's that process that developers go through to find, assess, and select the right piece of property to build on, because choosing that right piece of land that has minimal kind of regulatory red flags, or at least manageable orange flags, can really be the difference between a couple of months of permitting and years of permitting, or between meeting the project budget versus kind of millions of dollars wasted. So we're helping developers make their land decisions in just a couple of minutes, as opposed to the 3 to 5 weeks or so that I was doing it in my legacy consulting methods, and and for the speed is what most of our customers love, but of course, with technology, we're doing it for a fraction of the cost as well.
I mean, that's fantastic because, in real estate, location, 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 like it's
Hmm.
something we all know about, but are they considering this piece of it when they're thinking of location as well? And,
Yeah.
you don't know what you don't know. And especially for someone who's new into it or going into a different state, there's a lot of differences that can have implications on their decision making process. So it's
Yeah.
wonderful that you have that available to them. And how long have you guys been in business?
Let's see. I left my job, my previous position. I was national program manager for a big environmental consulting firm doing natural resources work, running a natural resources team. I left that position in, I think, January of 2017, but we were Transect here. We were in research and development for 2 years. So we really didn't go to market until 2019.
Okay. And so you've had, some time. And how has that process been in just developing the company and how you're, marketing and reach out and what that sort of has looked like and evolved over the last 4 years?
Well, when I mentioned that we're industry agnostic, I'd say from kind of a go-to-market perspective, I started my understanding of who uses our tool and who the optimal user of our tool is has changed over time, and it is still changing. So when I created Transect, I was coming out of the consulting world, and I knew and still believe that Transect, as it is right now, is a great tool for consultants to use, especially in like the bid process and the scoping process. And I won't get into too much of the nuance that you, Katrin, and I know about, but that may be too nuanced for the group here. But there's a lot of reasons why a consulting shop might want to put their knowledge base into a platform like Transect, so that when they maybe have a specialist leave or retire, they're actually retaining that knowledge because it's held in a knowledge base like Transect. But then we realized that developers weren't, or I'm sorry, consultants weren't ready for that transition yet. They do like their billable hours, right? Wonderful people, but they have a business model, and I get that. And so we transitioned to targeting the end user, which is actually the land developer. And so we are industry agnostic. I had come out of traditional energy, so I had several midstream clients and things like that that started using Transect, midstream real estate. And then COVID hit, and those were harder. Those industries were hit harder at the time,
Sure.
and we were coming right into the energy transition. And so we started targeting renewable energy developers, that is big solar farms, wind farms, battery storage, things like that. And those, because we were a growing startup, we kind of had to focus on one industry. And so we have been focusing on renewables. It's still a massive industry. We have new companies coming online on a regular basis that are trying to help build this energy transition. But we do have users in real estate, government, traditional energy, and things like that as well. So uh, my my understanding of who the prime user has changed over time, and it continues to change because we're also now starting to see more interest from consultants as well, now that we've been around a little bit longer.
And that's such a great thing for anyone starting a business to realize, that we one of the dangers is, falling in love with the idea and not being open to pivoting and to being flexible and,
Hmm.
and adapting. So it's a really great reminder of, you know, what you thought was going to be the path wasn't quite ready for you. So,
Yeah.
you got to kind of take a step back and reassess. But I want to go back into talking about the renewables. So over the summer, I took a road trip with my family to Colorado. So we have to drive through the whole of Texas because I'm in
Hmm.
the Houston area. And there's wide, wide, wide swaths of land that have the wind power
Hmm.
usage for their land. So most people have no idea like how that process even works, what that looks like. Um, can you talk a little bit about that just, to help raise awareness and education for the, layperson?
Yeah. Are you about like how the permitting process works? What can you clarify which part of the process you think your folks would be interested in?
Sure. I think just the land like procurement piece. I mean, how much land does it take for what is generated? Because it's such a bigger footprint than if we're talking about more traditional energy generation.
Yeah, yeah. So it's definitely that's kind of known in the industry at this point in time in the renewables industry space that a lot of the easy developable areas are already taken. So when you're driving through West Texas, you're probably driving through a lot of relict or traditional um, oil and gas well sites and things like that. West Texas is also ecologically diverse and amazing, but there's like less regulatory burden out there, especially because there's very few water resources and things like that. And so it really is a challenge at this point in time for renewable energy developers to find a site to build on, because like I said, all the easy sites have already been taken. We've been doing this long enough that those are already developed. And so each developer has their own secret sauce on what they are looking for in a piece of property and what they're willing to build on. And this is true not just in the renewable energy space, but in any development space, is what is the internal risk that a developer is looking to take? Are they okay building around floodplains and wetlands and endangered species because they understand those processes, those permitting processes, and they understand what it takes to avoid or permit those things? Or are they looking for like a completely kind of green, when I say green, like easy piece of property to build on? But they're also balancing that with where does that piece of property sit in relation to existing infrastructure. So you can build a wind farm on the perfect piece of property in the middle of nowhere, but if there's no transmission infrastructure to get the energy from that wind farm to into town, then that's a pretty useless piece of property.
Right.
And so it's not just about what's on the site. They're looking, solar is always looking for sites that are relatively flat, or if they do have slopes, that they have the right slope that's facing the sunshine. Um, Wind farms are typically looking for areas, huge pieces of property. Solar can be built on smaller pieces of property. Wind is looking for much, much, much bigger pieces of property. And they're also considering migratory flyways and landowner shed type issues and things like that, kind of how the community feels about it. Community sentiment is a big topic in renewable energy because we have all this new infrastructure coming into communities that hasn't been there before. So yes, they're looking on site, but they're also considering where they're building and how they can get their energy to market, and what the existing infrastructure is. So that's a massive challenge that our nation has, is we can build all of the generation sites that we want. There are permitting roadblocks with that, obviously, that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
But transmission is quite difficult because it often crosses state boundaries. So then you have interstate regulatory issues going on, and it crosses so many more landowners. So you get a lot of landowner concerns going on. And so we really have a challenge in this country, not just to create the generation and put up new solar and wind farms, but also how do we get it to market? We need those transmission lines as well. So the proximity of a potential wind farm or solar turbine to existing infrastructure is just as important as kind of what's on site. And those are all things that Transect helps our customers understand.
And I love just thinking through the process because, as we're going through our day, we flip on our computer, we, turn on the coffee pot, we go into the fridge for the creamer. Like there's electricity that we're using all the time, but it's so part of our life that I don't think we really, most people don't take the time to think, where does this come from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
How
where did it
get
start?
here?
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes to it. So I'd like to go back to the Endangered Species Act because I feel like in pop culture, in movies, TV references, it's easy to kind of poo-poo that law. I think because, America, we don't have that many like quote unquote sexy endangered species, right? It's
Right.
not
Yeah.
the elephant or the tiger or, these really majestic creatures. You'll be like, there's a skink that lives here
Yep.
that's endangered. I can't build here because of a skink. And we don't give it the same level of importance that we would to a majestic tiger, right?
Right.
So can you talk and help us to understand a little bit of the importance of that law and why a landowner or developer or any business would be concerned about that and how they can kind of reframe their thinking to see how could be a benefit to them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking when you said skink, one of the issues that we have here around San Antonio and Austin, where I live, is we have cave bugs. And they're like tiny little microscopic eyeless cave bugs that live in the aquifer here. But they have been known to shut down roadway projects. And those poor little bugs, they're not the majestic like bald eagle, right? So that was
Yeah,
like the
there you go.
flagship endangered species here in the United States, and it's recovered. And now, bald eagles are everywhere. They're like rats at this point in time. They're still, in fact, they're technically recovered. They're not on the endangered species list anymore, although they are now protected by their own special Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act. But those poor little bugs, everyone's just like, why is this bug interrupting my morning traffic? I wanted that highway to be built, and I've got this bug that's holding up this roadway construction project. But endangered species are, species in general, our ecosystem is so important to this like natural world that we live in. If anybody cares about going out hiking and having clean drinking water and, having a place for our kids to run around in the future, we've got to consider the whole ecosystem, and that includes species. And so, I think the hard part about development and species kind of occurring in the same place is information. And it's also, well, information and understanding how, as a developer, I can either benefit from or kind of minimize my impact from endangered species while protecting this as a resource. So I think that information is super important. If developers buy a piece of property and they don't know they have endangered species on that property, and then all of a sudden they realize it's going to be a massive, fee to address it and months and months and months of permitting, that can really sour a relationship with endangered species.
Sure.
And it can lead to really poor choices or, less beneficial choices. So I think if a developer knows ahead of time what they're getting into and is also offered solutions for how to, use that as use the presence of endangered species as almost like a benefit, right? Like I think there's a lot to, I'm going to use the word like ecotourism, but it's more like eco sensitivity, right? I think especially the next generation of folks that are coming out of college, they care a lot about climate change. Like climate change stress and anxiety is a is really big with the next generation. And I think that there's actually a selling point in, look, I'm a developer and I did a lot I worked with U.S. Fish and Wildlife, I worked with local state government, I worked with local biologists to keep this species in its habitat, and we worked around it. I get that might not always like directly benefit the bottom line, but I think in the end, you're building that residual goodwill. Your community will probably be happier. A lot of developments, for instance, are opposed by the local community. That would probably buy a lot of goodwill with like local community
Absolutely.
sentiment and things like that. And so I think there's a lot of intangibles to being thoughtful about how we're developing around our nation's most critical resources, endangered species, wetlands, archaeological resources. All of them should be considered. And that's really why Transect is here. So again, we're trying to balance that conservation of that natural world with the needs of the built world. We get that the two are colliding a lot. And I think having open, transparent communication and information sharing between all the different stakeholders is the key to making sure that we find that balance.
And that's so true in so many things. I do a lot of work on communication styles, and the ones that tend to have the most friction are generally the ones where that strength is the other one's weakness. And really there's such a powerful opportunity for strengthening one another and being better. So I think it kind of relates a little bit in my mind to that you really need one another, and having it sooner in the conversation instead of being something like, oh my God, I dread having to deal with environmental stuff. Like it would be so
Right.
much better if I just, plow ahead until they make me stop. But
Yeah.
you're just making your life harder. And I think
Hmm.
about, I grew up in an area of Houston called the Woodlands, where the Mitchell family that developed it, they were very intentional about not clear cutting for development. that when they took the piece of property that the home was going to be built on, that they only took out the trees that they needed. Because you think about other subdivisions where they clear cut everything and then they have to pay to bring in trees.
New sad trees. Yeah.
These sad trees. Exactly. I mean, I lived in a neighborhood and I think we were doing some landscaping and we needed to move one of the bushes, and we had lived there over a year at this point. And when we dug out the bush, its root ball was still exactly pot shaped.
Oh no.
Yeah. Right? Like it hadn't grown at all during that process. And so it's just a lot. And then it takes more water to reestablish these things. So, I mean, there's a lot of unintended consequences when there's other people out there that it's showing you that it can be done if you just take a little bit of time at the forefront to
and I think
through.
Yeah. And in that scenario, I would assume, I don't know much about the woodlands, but I've been through it a few times, that those well-established trees, those properties with those well-established trees, you get a premium on the property values for those kinds of places because people love trees. People don't want trees. A clear-cut piece of property with just a house in the middle of it.
Well, and you know, there's so many other things that you don't even realize. I know, like I live out in the woods now, not the woodlands, but just the woods. And when we were planning our property and really, you know, conscientious about what trees were there, there's been some trees that since we've lived here, we've had to cut down, and not realizing the effect that those pine trees had on keeping my house cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, you cut them down over you cut them down in the winter. And then all of a sudden it's like, man, the AC is struggling way more to keep up this year than it was last year. So it's those kind of unintended consequences as well that you don't notice what it's doing until it's gone, and then it's too late.
Yeah, great example. Soil erosion, like especially for construction practices, disturbing the ground by yanking up all the trees. I mean, trees and grass and all of that is so great at preventing soil erosion from running into our streams or just running off site and making unstable soils for places to build. There's so much benefit that vegetation has. And again, it's that full ecosystem of the water and the trees and the species and the geology and the soils. It all goes into building places where we want to live. There's a reason why people want to live in beautiful, green places. And I think that, what's in those situations, in any situation, it's good for the environment in those places also can be good for business, because that's just where people want to be and where people want to live, and people love beautiful places, and nature is beautiful.
I mean, it's not to, dump on West Texas. And you were so good at the beginning being like, there's just not a lot of resources there. I mean, anyone who's drove through it, like there's just not a lot there. And guess what? There's not a lot of people either.
That's right. Yeah.
So
yeah, still some interesting things out there. Like we just had the dune sagebrush lizard just got relisted out in West Texas. And so definitely some important resources out there for industry out there to consider. But yeah, when you drive through it, it definitely is, it's not as, I would probably want to live in the woods where you live before I would want to live in West Texas, right?
There you go. That's such a very nice way to say that.
Trying to be diplomatic.
So diplomatic. I love it. I love it. Okay. So I feel like that's enough information for at least someone who hasn't really thought about the environmental, or only thought of it as a cost to their balance sheet, as a different way to kind of think about this. But shifting gears, I want to talk about more of what you went through mentally in leaving a career that you'd done for 15 years, very well established, very safe, right? And having a steady paycheck, to moving into starting your own company, because it's a completely different skill set. Even though you expert knowledge and have all of that, I know for me, no one taught me about business. I had to go figure that out for myself. So can you share a little bit about that journey, and what it was for you, and kind of what you learned through that process?
Yeah, this is a great question. Yeah, I look back on myself in, 2016 when I decided this was a good idea. And I sometimes feel like I was a crazy person. Like starting your own business is a really, really, really hard. But honestly, it was one of the best things I ever could have done, because it has been such a personal growth challenge for me. And I have just learned so much about myself, and I've overcome so many misconceptions I had about my own limitations that I am a completely different person now than I think I would have been if I had stayed in the traditional consulting space. Two doors, and neither one of them are wrong, but this is the one that I took, and I'm glad that I did. And so I'm by nature a fairly risk averse person, honestly. And so it took some convincing by my co-founders to who had different skill sets than I did to realize this would be a good idea. But the other main thing that convinced me of this was I went to a few folks I knew in the developable space in traditional energy and real estate and said, I have this idea. Is this something you would buy? And they said, yeah, we would. And maybe they were just being nice because I knew them and they were not going to tell me the idea stuck to my face. But I took them seriously. And I was like, okay, if they would buy this thing, then I think this is a good idea. And so, in the tech space, we talk a lot about MVPs, minimum viable products, and, validating product market fit and all those funky buzzwords. But that really did help a lot. Like taking the worry and the fear and the risk averseness that I was feeling and giving it action by giving myself data that said, okay, people will buy this thing, gave me the inspiration to quit the safe paycheck job and start this because I knew people would pay for it. I knew people would buy it. I knew it was a need because I had been in the industry for so long. It wasn't like I just graduated from college and decided to solve environmental consulting. Like this was a place I had been in and seen the pain points. And so kind of combined with all of that, taking my fears and anxieties and making them actionable with some data around product market fit made the jump a little bit less concerning. And once I did it, there was the only way through was through at that point in time. So here we are.
There we are. And I think some misconceptions that I've come across is the amount of time it can sometimes take to bring that from idea to profit. It's not a straight road. It's definitely not a direct road. And sometimes it can be a long road. And I know that that's another big mental shift of like, how do you force yourself to keep going and still have that belief and conviction in the idea, in yourself, in the project, when maybe things in that moment don't seem like this is the best idea, or you have your family members being like, what are you doing? This is crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a few things. One, I feel like I came into this, I read somewhere, who knows where it was at this point in time, because it's a long time ago, is that for a tech company, which is what we are, we're a SaaS tech company, it takes at least 7 years for things to really start going. And so and I'm actually right at the 7-year mark, and things are like just in the last year really started taking off. And so I think I had in my head that this was going to be a slog. Like I somehow managed to set that expectation for myself. But in the meantime, when I wanted to just go back to bed for a week and not do this anymore because this was hard, my favorite thing to do is to go talk to my customers. Because even if I pick the ones that I know really love me, if I just need like that pick me up, I'm like, can you just remind me why, or do it like a customer feedback call, right? What do you like about the platform? What do you wish the platform could do? If you had a magic wand, what do you wish we could do, right? Hearing from customers how our platform is changing their lives and really changing their business behavior and making their projects more successful, just to get you through the next day or the next week, or to offset something challenging or bad that happened. That was always what I did.
It's fuel.
It's fuel. It just filled the tank back up to get me through another day. And so I think setting my expectations around how long it truly takes to build a business, combined with, kind of self-care practices like calling a customer that will say something nice about my business. Those are the things that can kind of get you through. And also I have a bit of a mental map backwards of amazing things that have happened here at Transect, and things that that really accelerated our growth. And some of them were luck, some of them were skill, but all of them have pointed to this business should still be around, right? Like we are changing business behavior. We are doing something good here, because when we look back, we see the people that have helped us, the people that have come alongside us, the investors, the board members, the the staff, the team members, our employees that have all come on, we're attracting really, really great people.
Mm.
And so looking back on all the things we have done is also validating, so that when we hit the next challenging thing, we're like, we've been through this before. We've done this challenging thing before, and we'll do it again.
Yeah. And that's the mental aspect of it's just a challenging thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's not the end. It's not a problem necessarily, but it's just the next thing that we have to go through. And it's just a bit trickier than the last thing we went through.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's
it.
fine. Everything's going to be fine. I tell myself that a lot too. It's fine.
It's fine. It's fine.
Everything's fine.
I'm okay. It's okay.
Everything's under control here.
We're okay.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Well, Robin, thank you so much for being here and for giving a bit more insight into what Transect does and what, the need that it is answering and how you were able to be on there. I think it's such a great reminder for everyone and a key takeaway of, when you do have those ideas, when they do come to you, of a little bit of research ahead of time to see what those expectations, talking to someone who's done it, being able to do your research, which ties in perfectly to what we talked about, the environmental piece. The companies need to do their research too, to understand how to make everything as smooth as possible. Because once really we set the expectations, I mean, that's where the magic comes in. Like, can you set the correct expectations for success?
That's right. Absolutely.
And then once that's set, you just push through. You just keep going. I'm fine. It's fine. We're all fine.
Everything's fine here. Yeah.
Well, for those who are interested, how is the best way to reach out with you, and how is the best way someone could work with Transect?
Yeah. Anyone who's interested in learning more about me or about Transect can just head to www.transect.com. That's the easiest way to see what we're doing to address these issues with the environmental space, and then also to reach out to me, either one.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Robin. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks again for having me. This was really fun.
Thank you. And for the listeners, thank you so much for being here. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like and subscribe and to share it with your network. If there is a topic or industry that you are interested in, please reach out. I would love to go find the perfect guest to interview to get all your questions answered, and maybe more, because we never know where these conversations are going to go. Until next time, everyone, have a great day.